Dear viewers, this video discusses the current stance and implications of the United States in the US-China trade war, and whether ASEAN countries will side with the United States or China in the ongoing geopolitical landscape, considering their respective influences and what this means for the future. In this section, we will thoroughly examine in detail the specific American products that are most heavily reliant on trade with China. All right, tomorrow we will talk about this matter in detail as we have planned to understand its implications. Does this mean Trump is backing down? He now says in his latest statement he will significantly reduce tariffs on China. What exactly do the US and China each have in the ongoing trade discussions that they can't live without the other? Tomorrow I will answer you, and of course we will talk about stocks. Viewers have been very happy these past 2 days because two of my stocks have risen significantly. Palantir, viewers are very happy. It rose by over $100. Everyone is making money. In such a market, everyone is making money. TEM rose by 17% yesterday. The Taiwanese stocks I picked have risen, and the Japanese stocks I picked have also risen. All right. The Wall Street Journal reports that the Donald Trump administration is considering significantly reducing the high tariffs on Chinese imports. This is very strange. Donald Trump is playing a big game, according to those people. He will retract his move. Isn't it funny? He hasn't made the move. The mistake is just your illusion. They haven't even discussed reducing tariffs. So why is that? What was the point of imposing them back then? It has already eased the US-China tensions that disrupted global trade and investment. Actually, first, the stock market falls. Donald Trump can't stand it. Last time when the stock market fell for several days in a row, he changed the reciprocal tariffs to 10% and paused for 90 days. Then this time, after the market fell for a few more days, he couldn't help but come out and say to relax trade with China. And with the dollar falling again, I have to tell everyone, US bonds are also falling. Informed sources say Donald Trump has not made a final decision. Discussions are ongoing, and many options are being considered. There will be no unilateral actions. Everything needs to be negotiated with the Chinese side. There won't be unilateral reductions. If China reduces, he reduces. At that time, if you raise, he raises. Now, if you reduce, he reduces, generally speaking. Tariffs on China might be reduced to 50% to 65%, a significant decrease from the current 145%, but still at a high level. If you reduce it to 50% to 60%, it doesn't have practical significance. I would say I estimate that even at 145%, some things still need to be sold to China. With a trade volume of over 500 billion USD, if it drops by 80%, there is still 20%. If it drops to 50% to 60%, there will be 30% to 40%. That's how it is. Donald Trump is considering the classification proposed by the House China Committee. It should have been classified long ago. How could it not be classified? For goods that do not threaten national security, impose a 35% tariff. For example, why impose such a high tariff on sneakers? A 35% tariff is more than enough. This already punishes China, because if Vietnam has a 15% difference, a 20% gap would make it very difficult for China to compete. For instance, why impose such high tariffs on t-shirts? I don't understand. For strategically important goods, impose at least 100%. In fact, decouple in these areas. This includes a wide range of products such as semiconductors, electrical products, solar panels, lithium batteries, and rare earths, all of which are subject to a 100% tariff. Additionally, pharmaceuticals are also affected, meaning there's no business to be done here. Treasury Secretary Bessent said that Donald Trump did not unilaterally propose to lower tariffs on China. It requires interaction from both sides to bring about change. Why did they increase it back then? You could have just not increased it. I don't understand. Initially, you added 34%, and then China added 34%. If you hadn't increased it, it would have stayed that way. Then you added another 50%, and China added 50% in response, and then you increased it again. Now you want to reverse it. On April 22nd, he himself said he was willing to reduce tariffs on Chinese goods. In the second term, the 145% tariff imposed on China will be reduced, but it will not be zero. It will not go back to previous levels. Previously, the U.S. tariff on Chinese goods was 2.75%, which was before 2018. After 2018, experts calculated the tariff rate to be 19%. On April 23rd, China responded to the U.S. regarding trade negotiations, saying, "We can negotiate, but I will not let you negotiate with a gun pointed at me." China's stance has softened because they cannot hold out. Analysts point out that even if Donald Trump were to cut some of the tariffs on Chinese imports by half, the U.S. market would still be closed to many Chinese manufacturers. I have said that if the tariff is 50%, it would be impressive if China could retain half of its exports to the U.S. It would be impressive if it reached over $200 billion USD. High tariffs have led to a depletion of U.S.-China trade. People familiar with the White House say Donald Trump has significant room to reduce tariffs on China, but it still advances the economic decoupling between the U.S. and China. On the surface, it seems there is not much pressure, but in reality, there is no substantial action. Recently, both the U.S. and China have expressed an open attitude towards reaching an agreement. Compared to last year, the attitude over the past month has already eased. Donald Trump, from the first time he increased tariffs, had already asked Xi Jinping to call him. When Xi Jinping didn't call, he added another 10%. He kept increasing as Xi Jinping still didn't call. 10%, 10%, 34%, 50%, and when it reached 50%, he said he was waiting for Xi Jinping's call, but Xi Jinping didn't call. Let me tell you a joke. Donald Trump said he would reduce tariffs because China apologized. He asked, when did China ever say sorry? He said the U.S. called Xi Jinping, and the operator on the other side said Xi Jinping's phone was broken. Sorry. He said they apologized, so now they're reducing tariffs. Currently, the U.S. suggests that Wang Yi and Rubio have discussions, but this is pointless, as these two are not trade negotiators. It should be the Minister of Commerce and He Lifeng having the talks, but He Lifeng cannot engage externally. So now Li Chenggang has been appointed as the trade representative. Xi Jinping is visiting Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia, old friends, and now people on the mainland have given him the nickname White Money Scatterer. Why is that? As soon as he leaves, those bastards strictly control the origin of goods, with Vietnam's internal documents on April 15th severely cracking down on illegal transshipment of goods. It's already in effect. Don't get me into trouble. If you pass through me to ship to the U.S., I might earn 1-2%. In the past, they would just turn a blind eye. Now, to earn this 2%, my trade surplus with the U.S. has increased significantly, and the U.S. has collected a lot more tariffs. It's like winning a candy, but losing a life. Vietnam's trade documents indicate that the U.S. generally imposes import taxes, which has exacerbated trade fraud. If illegal transshipment is not curbed, Vietnam's tariffs will be very high in the future. Don't get me into trouble. The documents do not specifically mention China, but Reuters reports that 40% of Vietnam's imports come from China, and the U.S. is the largest export market, so the reference to transshipment clearly points to China. Everyone, as you can see, Take a look here. Those two lines come up here. It's very clear that many things, Vietnam's exports are coming from China. This part is called China's added value. Take a look. It wasn't this fast before. And some of these are also fake. Many are China's added value. Vietnam's goods worth over $100 billion are transshipped from China. All right. Even Cambodia, which listens to China the most, is doing what? So when it comes to money, it's not trustworthy. The Cambodian government is amending regulations to strengthen control and prevent Cambodia from being used as a transit point for laundering. To avoid being subjected to a high tariff of 49% by the United States, the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Cambodia, Barnett, stated that if the United States views Cambodia as a transit point for Chinese goods entering the U.S., it would have a severe impact on the Cambodian people. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce warned that if any country sacrifices China's interests in exchange for U.S. tariff exemptions, it is like negotiating with a tiger, and there will be countermeasures. However, falsely claiming a change of production location is wrong, and others can take action against you. The U.S. Department of Commerce recently investigated and has already targeted Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand, imposing anti-dumping and countervailing duties on solar products. This will take effect in June, with Cambodia's tax rate at 3,500%. All right, South Korea and China signed a free trade agreement, and on April 23rd, a special task force was established to combat trade fraud, especially Chinese goods, using fake Made in Korea labels to evade U.S. tariffs with 29.5 billion Korean won in the first quarter of 2025. Over 100 million Hong Kong dollars were incorrectly labeled as Made in Korea, with 97% of them sold to the U.S. This figure is already from 2024. This is the first quarter. Already 85% of last year's total, indicating an increase of 300% to 400% this year. Due to Donald Trump's imposition of high tariffs on China, there has been a sharp increase in origin laundering. He highlighted many violations. For example, mattresses made in China are repackaged in Korea, and 3.3 billion Korean won worth of Chinese batteries and cathode materials are falsely labeled as Korean-made products for export. In March, Korea seized 19 billion Korean won, which is about 100 million Hong Kong dollars, worth of Chinese surveillance parts assembled in Korea. These were exported as Korean-made to circumvent U.S. export restrictions on Chinese communication equipment. What is Taiwan doing? On April 23rd, Taiwan's Minister of Economic Affairs, Wang Meihua, announced that in the future, the origin of automobiles and electronic information products will exclude the Chinese supply chain. Moreover, they are enhancing the Made in Taiwan certification. How should I put it? It means that some electronic products and cars cannot use any mainland Chinese parts at all. They must be completely outside the red supply chain. Currently, the rule is that if a Taiwanese product has 35% added value, it can be considered made in Taiwan. However, the US has different regulations. In the US, if a product contains Chinese components, 35% is considered made in China. Do you understand? In the US, for Taiwan, as long as 35% is made in Taiwan, it is considered made in Taiwan. So you have 35% made in Taiwan. But if you also have 50% of imported parts from China, then the U.S. does not recognize it as made in Taiwan. The U.S. considers it made in China. So should Taiwan change its rules? Okay, DPP legislator Chung Chia-pin questioned, if a car has 50% Chinese parts and adds 35% value in Taiwan, it is considered a domestic car in Taiwan, but the U.S. considers it a Chinese car. Kuo Chi-hui responded by considering including the proportion of Chinese components in the MIT certification to ensure that Taiwan standards are the same as the U.S. standards. Chung Chia-pin said that under the current trade law, reporting origin fraud earns you a certificate of commendation. That's not the case. For other things, there are bonuses. Now, it's not like that. Now, whoever reports someone for origin fraud, how much they are fined. And how much goods were confiscated, half of it is given as a bonus. Everyone is very happy and eager to act. He is now promoting the non-red supply chain. This aims to reduce dependence on the Chinese supply chain, expanding from electronic information products to automobiles and other fields, thereby reducing trade risks. Vietnam, Cambodia, South Korea, and Taiwan are all adopting enhanced regulatory measures to combat China's origin fraud. Let me show you this table. What products does the United States heavily rely on China for? This is the value, $45.6 billion for mobile phones. This is iOS. It accounts for 97% of mobile phone imports and 90% of domestic consumption. I don't understand. They didn't include Vietnam. Laptops account for 94.5%, making up 95% of imports and 94.5% of U.S. consumption. You could say that imposing tariffs would result in a total loss. In the short term, it's impossible for anyone to supply that many laptops. If you want to buy a laptop, the price would at least double. Electronic and electrical equipment is significant at $123.8 billion USD, with 90% being imports. However, domestically, companies like Dell have 21%. Toys amount to $30 billion, with 80% being imports, and they account for 35.7% to 36% of U.S. consumption. These toys are imported from China and cannot be replaced in the short term. Furniture is $18.5 billion, with 68% being imports and 9.7% because the U.S. has its own furniture. Automobiles are $16.4 billion, accounting for 5.4% and 1.9%, which is not significant. Now Volvo has gone bankrupt. This is in the U.S. Optical medical instruments are $11.7 billion, accounting for 22.3% of imports. 12.1% of what the U.S. uses are optical and medical instruments. And some of these inexpensive items really need to be made in China. Steel is $11.7 billion, 29%, 4.9%, but much of it comes through a second channel, steel and aluminum. Pharmaceuticals are $1.8 billion, 2.3%, which is very little, but they are disproportionately concentrated in antibiotics and vitamins. Lithium batteries are $9.1 billion, accounting for 54% of imports. Originally, 46% came from Japan and South Korea because LG and Panasonic have lithium batteries until March. They account for 33% of internal consumption. Which one could be fatal? Let me tell you, don't calculate this. It's the mobile phone. Now they come from India. Laptops. There's nothing to be done. This is unmanageable. Toys at 35% are also very serious, I can tell everyone. Then there are lithium batteries, such as these and other types of power storage devices. These three are the most serious.